And we are back. Part 3, Sam Little. Scott, what's up?
Dude, I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't expect this to go on as long as it has. When I started reading into this guy, I was like, okay, yeah, he committed 93 killings, murders. But I couldn't find any super great details. So I was like, okay, maybe this will be a one-parter, right? Well, then whenever you start reading into it and you start diving deeper and deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole, you start finding more and more stuff. So I had to go through the court transcript. We went through last episode, we went through the 3 murders. On those 3 in particular murders, I had to go through and I had to delete out a lot of the stuff y'all don't want to hear, like, well, in appendix, blah, 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 it's section dotty, it states this. Well, then I'd have to go to that and I'd have to pull up where it would say. Anyway, I pieced everything together. From here forward, what we're going to talk about is pretty much how Sam Little was ultimately caught. Obviously we know he killed the 3 people, but how was it specified directly to him? How did they know it was just him? So our first little section we're going to go over is going to be specifically on that. And then we're going to jump over into 4 witnesses that are living testimonies to Sam Little's attacks. And they actually testified against him in court. And then after that, we got a little extra little tidbits of things that we're going to go over that I think you'd find pretty interesting.
I bit my tongue for 2 episodes wanting to ask you how he was caught. I've wanted to know this. This is what I've been waiting on. I mean, this is my episode right here. This is what I've been waiting for.
All right, well, let's jump into it, man.
I have not wanted to ask because I knew if I asked, you was going to tell me, and I wanted to wait until it came up, but I've bit my tongue till it's ready to bleed. I've been wanting to know.
And so we're just going to jump into it, right? April 2012, LAPD detective Mincy Roberts was assigned to the Cold Case Homicide Unit. It was formed in 2001, and this unit was charged with investigating Los Angeles homicides that had been unsolved for 5 years. At the time, there were more than 9,000 cases that were unsolved for 5 years. That was in 2001. All right, so that was in 2012 whenever he was assigned. Roberts testified, "We were looking mostly at rape kits, things with biological evidence. As the years went on, as forensics improved, we started looking at clothing, pulling the same old cases, looking at clothing, fingernails, and it's still evolving based on the science." So this goes back to episode 1 when we were talking about how the DNA samples, they weren't going to pull DNA. They would hold evidence, but they're not going to pull DNA from that evidence because back in the older days, unless you knew inconclusively it was this person, there's no reason to do it. The technology just wasn't there. So Mincy Roberts testified she noticed similarities between the Alfred, Nelson, and Apodaca killings. They all appeared to be what we would classify as body dumps. They were all particularly clothed, pants around the ankles, shirts lifted up, most of them only having clothing from the waist up. They were all women. The proximity to each other, they were all very close to each other as far as the crime scenes or where the bodies were located. So one, Sam messed up because he killed these 3 people really quick and he dumped them really close. The cause of death was manual strangulation in all 3 cases, which threw a red flag. And they all appeared to have suffered some sort of beating. Another red flag. Literally, I just listed all the red flags. I listed every MO that Sam Little has or had.
Literally.
Yeah, literally. The bodies had all been found within a 5-mile radius of each other. Think about that.
What was the time period between those 3 that got him caught?
We're looking at July 13th, 87, August 14th, 89, September 3rd, 89. So I think ultimately the August and September one, that's only a month, not even a full month from each other. All 3 of those were found within a 5-mile radius of each other. So he did things too quick and too close.
Is that the only time he did those that quick to each other also?
No.
Well, he's had 93. There's got to be a bunch of them that were fairly close to each other.
Well, there were a bunch of them that were some the same day, but miles and miles and miles and miles away from each other. He'd do one in the morning and then at night kill somebody else in a different state. You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
So he didn't do that.
Yeah, not 5 miles apart.
Correct. And not only that, but he dumped them within a 5-mile radius of each other.
5 miles.
Yeah, it's almost like he was trying to get caught.
See, that's what I've been so curious of. There's so many of them that want the recognition for what they've done. You know, it becomes this whole entire, like I said, it's their award ceremony.
Right.
So that's what I was curious about him. And the things that I've heard, it's not like he dumps the bodies, but I haven't heard anything out of what's said so far that he looks for himself in the news or looks for anything, you know, like recognition on what he does. I haven't heard anything that gives that kind of...
No. In fact, actually, you know, we're going to jump off of this 5-mile radius. So there was one case I read about. Where Sam killed a woman, put her in a garage, a 2-car garage behind somebody's home, propped her up to where it looked like she was still alive, left her there. 2 days later, cops are sitting at the garage, taping it off. He walked by, stopped, and talked to the detectives about it. Like, hey, what's going on here? What happened? So I think he was just kind of getting more brave. He was trying to see how far he could push his boundaries before he got caught. In my opinion, I feel like that's what he was doing.
Right. He has put in so much time and so much that he's become invincible to himself.
Yeah.
After that many kills, after that many times of walking away from everything you do.
Literally.
I mean, yeah, he did get, like you said, he got some prison time here and there, but for the charges, he had never gotten like trouble for
nothing serious, nothing significant. It all got dismissed. So to get back into this, after they found out that they were in the 5-mile radius of each other, Alfred and Apodaca's bodies had been discovered approximately 1.5 miles from each other. In April 2012, Roberts began to conduct a background investigation of Little. She determined that he had been living in South LA area during the period of 1987 to 1989. When she learned that Little was presently in custody in Kentucky, she sent detectives there to interview him and obtain oral swabs to be used for DNA comparisons. Now, the only reason she did this was he had been busted in LA for sexual assault, battery. I mean, he had a huge rap sheet in LA. Huge rap sheet.
Right.
And a lot of the things that they're seeing in these bodies were things that they had seen that he had previously done to other people that lived. And this also comes into the witnesses that I'm going to tell you about that testified against him as well. They came out and pretty much said, hey, this is the guy that did this to me. And they had very similar instances to what happened to the ones that actually passed away. She determined that he had been living there in the period of 87 to 89. He was presently in Kentucky. So they got the oral swabs from him for DNA comparison. Los Angeles Police Department Detective Susan, not even going to try the last name, another member of the cold case unit, testified that she went to Louisville in September 2012 to meet with Little and obtain buccal samples for DNA testing. Little told her that during the years of 87 to 90, he had been living in San Diego and South Central LA. Little also said he was a boxer, middleweight prize boxer. End quotes. While Susan showed Little photographs of Nelson and Apodaca, he said he had never seen them in his life, and he was pretty adamant about it. So there he goes claiming his innocence because he hasn't been caught for it yet. Little told Susan that he was impotent and therefore he couldn't be with anybody. However, he also said that he could ejaculate and produce sperm. Little was subsequently extradited to Los Angeles. Los Angeles Police Department Detective Jorge Morales testified that on October 19, 2012, he was one of the officers who escorted Little back to California from Dallas, Texas. Morales described Little as a big guy, about 5'11", and I believe 235 pounds was the weight that we used when we booked him. While they were passing through LA International Airport, Little spotted a young Hispanic woman at the terminal and said, these are in quotes, "Look at that ass. I would like to get me some of that and get in between those legs." And I'm going to leave out the last 3 words because it's very explicit. It involves a tongue. I'll leave it at that. So now what we're going to get into, Brent, is we're going to get into some testimonies. All I have is first name and last name letter. So Hilda N. testified that on July 31st, 1980, she was living in Carver Village, a housing project in Pascagoula, Mississippi. Hilda worked as a prostitute to support herself and her children. Across the street from where she lived was The Front, which was a strip of nightclubs, pool halls, and other businesses. She was inside one of the nightclubs when Little approached and greeted her, saying he remembered her from when she worked at the shipyard. Hilda had worked at the shipyard, but testified that she did not remember Little from working there. Little never worked at the shipyard.
But she said he did.
No, he said that he remembers her from there. She worked there, but he never did.
What was he at the shipyard for?
Don't know. She testified she didn't remember Little from working there. Hilda told Little she was looking for a date, i.e. to get paid to have sex. He asked how much. She replied $50. After she drank a beer he bought for her, they went to her apartment to have sex, but as soon as they got inside and Hilda closed the apartment door, Little punched her in the back of the head and started choking her. Hilda lost consciousness. She woke up lying on her bed with Little kneeling on the bed and holding her down as he continued to choke and hit her in the face. She lost consciousness again and woke up naked in her bathtub. It was full of water and Little had tied a scarf around her neck. Little reportedly pulled her up by the scarf and then pushed her head under the water. As Hilda tried to fight back, Little continued punching her in the face. She thought he was trying to kill her. Hilda eventually passed out for a third time. When Hilda's friend and fellow prostitute Dolores knocked on her bedroom window and called out her name to check on her well-being, Little responded by saying she's taking care of business. So the only reason Dolores knocked on the door is she's heard stories about Little, and she was really concerned, as well as they were taking quite a long time. When Hilda next regained consciousness, she was in the hospital. She spent 3 days there being treated for her injuries. Hilda had suffered numerous scratches and bruises over her face, neck, and chest area. Her throat hurt so much that she could not talk, and her eyes were bloodshot. She did not tell the authorities what had actually happened, but instead told them she had been the victim of a home invasion. However, in November 1982, Hilda was contacted by Pascagoula police, and she then told them what had actually happened. Hilda went to the police station and wrote out a statement. They showed her a set of photographs, and she identified Little. This is where he starts getting known. She later went to court to testify against him when she was 8 months pregnant, but when she got on the witness stand and saw Little, she got scared and peed herself.
On the witness stand?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
As a result, she did not testify and was released from her subpoena. So now we're going to go to 1981. We have...
Can I stop you right there for a second? You said when they went in the apartment, the first thing he did was hit her and knock her out?
Yep.
She woke up with him choking her. So when he assaults these women, sexually assaults them, are they unconscious? Does he do it
after he's knocked them out?
Post-mortem?
Nope, just after he's knocked them out. There was a couple cases where there was some necrophilia that took place, but not all of them now.
Okay. Because that's what I was wondering about that with him, because that was Jeffrey Dahmer's MO also.
Yep.
He wanted them
dead before he did anything.
Not moving.
Yep.
No, not necessarily dead, just not moving.
Oh, that's right. Because
he had a lot of sexual assaults that he didn't kill. He would just he wanted the men that he assaulted just not moving. Yeah. All right, carry on.
So in 1981, we have Lila M., who was living in Pascagoula, Mississippi. She testified that she had 2 residences, one in Carver Village where she was taking care of business, and one at the Regency Woods apartment where she lived with her 3 children. Her business was prostitution. On November 19th, 1981, Lila was walking along the street when Little parked his car, approached her and asked, "Do you date?" Lila understood this to mean, "Do you prostitute?" and confirmed that she did and said the price was $50. Lila said she lived right around the corner, but Little said no, he was going to the Shamrock Hotel. They got into his car, but when Lila told Little to turn around because he had driven past the hotel, Little replied, "I don't need to turn around for what I want to do to you." At that point, he suddenly punched her in the back of the head and then between the eyes. Stopped the car, continued punching her, and then began choking the life out of her. This is all in the middle of the street, by the way. She tried to defend herself by scratching, kicking, and biting him. So she was questioned, "So you fought back?" She answered with, "Everything I had." She's questioned again, "Did you think that he was trying to kill you, choke you to death?" And she replied, "Definitely he was going to kill me." Lila managed to escape from the car a few times, but Little caught her each time and threw her back inside. She testified this man was so quick he could catch me before I could get from here to here, from the station wagon, and drag me back. At one point, it was a guy came by on a motorcycle, a little white boy come by on a bicycle, and he asked me, did I need some help? And I couldn't say nothing because at that time, I couldn't talk. She was questioned because of the pressure that Little put on your throat, and she replied, yes, ma'am. And Little said to the boy, she's just drunk. That's my old lady. Don't worry about her. Finally, Lila managed to climb through a small window in the back of Little's car and escape by running through highway traffic wearing just a pair of shorts. Ultimately, someone took her to the hospital. The police never came to the hospital to interview her, and at that time, she did not go to the police. However, in 1982, just like Hilda, Pascagoula police officers took her to the station and questioned her about the incident. She told them she'd been attacked by Little and identified him in a photo array. She subsequently went with Hilda to a court hearing, but they didn't get a chance to talk to anybody because Hilda urinated all over herself. When Hilda left the court, Lila walked home with her. When they told Hilda to go, I left with her because I felt like they wasn't going to do nothing, no way. That was in quotes from Lila. So now we've got 1984. We got Lori B., who testified that she was living in San Diego on the night of September 26, 1984. She was walking to her friend's apartment. Now, this is the same years, if I'm not mistaken, 1984. No, it's 5 years earlier. So this is 5 years earlier than whenever he got busted for the 3, but it's still in San Diego.
Okay.
On the night of September 26, 1984, she was walking to her friend's apartment when Little approached her from behind, put her in a chokehold, and then dragged her into his car. Little said he had purchased $150 worth of cocaine earlier that evening. He drove to a deserted lot near the freeway that people had been using as an illegal dumping site. Little pulled Lori into the car's back seat by the neck and shoulders when he began forcibly kissing her. Lori tried to push him away, but that appeared to piss him off, and his right hand went around my neck. He began to choke her. She stated, one hand all the way around with his thumb right in the middle, and started controlling my abilities to breathe. She asked him not to hurt her and said she would cooperate if he wanted to rape her. Little said he didn't want to hurt her and to trust him and that he loved her. As he's choking her, says he loved her. Didn't want to hurt her. After he put her in a chokehold.
Was this the same one in that interview you played in part 2 where he said that he really loved her?
No, this is a different one. The ones in the confession tapes, they were all confirmed kills, confirmed murders. Little pulled off Lori's nylons, underpants, and shoes. He used the nylons to tie her hands behind her back. Little got on top of Lori and choked her again until she passed out. When she regained consciousness, she was gurgling, sputtering to get some air. And I asked him again, don't hurt me. I'll cooperate. Don't hurt me. Little ignored that request and asked me to swallow. He liked to feel it when I swallowed while his thumb was over my neck. So the following questions ensued. And when he asked you to swallow, do you remember specifically what he said? She replied, he loved when I swallowed it. It excites him. And he had a smile on his face. And when you would swallow, what would he do? She replied, oh, it became a game. Right before I would go unconscious, and I'm sure he was able to see my eyes roll back into my head because I'd feel it. He'd lift up just enough pressure so I would not go unconscious. He asked me to swallow again, press down harder, so I would almost go unconscious again. And it just kind of kept going until I completely blacked out. When Lori regained consciousness, she tried to scream, but no sound came out because of the pain in her throat. Little pulled his penis out of his pants. It was erect at the time. And he pulled my body up towards him and was rubbing against me. And then it went limp and he wasn't able to actually pull off sexual intercourse. This made Little angry again and he choked Lori into unconsciousness. The next thing Lori remembered was being pushed out of Little's car onto a heap of trash. Little then got on top of her with his knee on her chest and choked her again until she lost consciousness a final time. When at last she awoke, Lori discovered that her bra had been lifted up over her chest. She believed Little had probably done this while she was unconscious. She testified that she sat still as a board and pretended to be dead. because I was scared to death that he was still there watching me, that he was going to come back and realize I wasn't dead and choke me some more. So I sat there for at least 30 minutes on the ground in the exact position that he had left me, in the trash. Lori then got up and walked until she found a payphone and called a friend to pick her up. She was treated at a hospital. During her testimony, Lori characterized her encounter with Little this way. I really knew this wasn't about rape. It wasn't about assault. It was about death, power, and control. Whether or not I was going to live. And we've got one more testimony. This is in 1984 as well.
All of these are at this one trial?
These are previously, and this is what helped them indict him for the 3 murders, but they also pulled them into the trial as well and then retestified them in the trial for what he did to them as well.
So these that you're reading are actually these aren't the trial transcripts right here. This is the interviews.
This is
the assault interviews.
This is actual transcripts when they went to police stations.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And they pulled these transcripts and put them in the court hearing with the current witnesses. They flew the 2 from Pascagoula to California, and then they got the 2 from San Diego to go to LA when the trial took place, and then they retestified them again just to see if there was any inconsistencies in their testimony, and there wasn't.
Okay.
So we've got our last witness here. Her name's Tanya J. On October 25th, 1984, at around 4:50 a.m., San Diego Police Department officer Louis Tamagni and his partner Wayne Spees were on patrol in a marked police car with their lights off. They were driving near an abandoned lot known for stolen vehicles, prostitution, and narcotics use. They traveled a short distance along a dirt road and came across a vehicle matching the description of the car used in connection with the attack of Lori, which is the previous person we talked about. They turned on all of the patrol car's lights. Almost immediately, a large black male exited the vehicle. Lewis identified this man as Defendant Little, who was zipping up his pants and appeared to be very nervous. He kept looking at us, kept looking at the car, looking back at us, and looking back at the car. When the officers asked him to come over, Little said, "It's nothing, it's just my wife and we're fighting." The officers told him to come over and talk to them. As Little approached, Lewis could see bloody scratches on his neck. Lewis told Spees to stay with Little while he went to check out Little's car. When Lewis shone his flashlight into the car, he saw a naked woman, later identified as Tanya J, in the back seat. One leg was up over the seat. The other leg was on the rear passenger seat in the rear of the car. Her upper torso and her head were crammed down on the floorboard between the seat portion of the driver's seat and seat portion of the rear seat. I saw a black bra not attached, but on her chest. Her lips and her mouth were bloody, and it looked like she had been punched or beaten. Lewis saw bruises on her face and her neck as well. Tanya was motionless and unresponsive. Her eyes were rolled back into her head, and she was just gulping and gasping for air. The officers went up arresting Little and called for an ambulance. The officers then rendered first aid to Tanya, who told them that Little had raped her. Shortly thereafter, paramedics arrived and transported Tanya to the hospital, where she was treated for her injuries. Marvin Lee Shaw, a San Diego police officer, tried to interview Tanya in the trauma unit, and he testified Tanya was in somewhat a state of shock. She was in and out of consciousness, and she had difficulty speaking. There was bruising on her neck, left arm, and chest and face area. Her eyes had broken blood vessels as well. She also had bruises on the inner thigh and pelvic region and near her vagina. As he was being transported by the police officers to a hospital for an examination, Little stated, "That bitch didn't give me my money's worth. She's going to give it to me or else." Little said he had met Tanya at a bar in downtown San Diego where she agreed to perform a sex act for $20. He said she directed him to the location where the officer discovered them. They got into the backseat of Little's car and Tanya started playing with it. Little told Officer Lewis that he wanted more and she refused. Little told Officer Lewis that he told her that she wasn't going anywhere until I got my slang word, we'll just say sex. Little said he grabbed her in self-defense, that she deserved it. She cheated him. While the officers were driving him to jail, Little asked several times, "How's the bitch?" Is she going to make it? According to Little's motion papers in the trial court, a San Diego trial arising out of the Lori B. incident ended in a mistrial, after which Little pled guilty to aggravated assault against Lori and aggravated assault against Tanya. This was in that timeline where he only served like 3 years.
Right.
So, of all those testimonies, the two he got caught with, the things they saw, how in the hell do you have a mistrial on that? I mean, the evidence is there.
I mean, if there was a mistrial there, was there any part in there where the police dropped the ball? Like it's questions were not done without Miranda rights read. Was there anything like that transpired to cause a mistrial?
I didn't see anything that specified anything like that. They led it as a mistrial. If we go back to episode 1, they led it as a mistrial because there was insufficient evidence of rape and beating.
And they found her in the back seat, one leg over the front seat.
Pretty much mangled up.
Yeah.
Contorted.
But insufficient evidence.
Insufficient evidence.
And when they pulled up, he was getting out of the car.
Zipping up his pants.
Yeah.
But he said that she didn't give him his money's worth because she's a prostitute. And that's what they chalked it up as. It's just a prostitute. And therefore, you're let go.
Right.
So now we kind of got a little discussion to go over. While conceding that the evidence demonstrated his DNA had been found on the clothing of Alfred and Apodaca and on the fingernail clippings of Nelson, Little argues, however, the date of the DNA deposit could not be determined. According to the prosecution theory, these women were prostitutes and therefore likely to have contact with many men. That appellant may have been a customer does not make him, talking about Little, the murderer. All the DNA shows is mere presence and opportunity, which is insufficient to sustain a conviction. During closing argument, the prosecutor argued several inculpatory theories to the jury. She asserted the evidence demonstrated that Little was a serial sexual predator and a killer. He is a man, as you've learned, who brutalizes and dehumanizes women, who derives pleasure from the infliction of pain and suffering of his victims. You also learned that these women obviously suffered from issues. They had cocaine addictions, and some of them may have even resorted to prostitution in order to be able to support their drug problems. And you also learned about 4 other women who were attacked and brutalized by the defendant coming from the same situation. So that's where they pulled those 4 witnesses to retestify. Pointing just to the murders of Linda Alford, Audrey Nelson, and Guadalupe Apodaca, the prosecutor asked the jury, what are the chances in this case that you have 3 separate women who are all found dead, all 3 of them are strangled to death manually, all 3 of them are left naked from the waist down, with their genitals exposed, all 3 of them disposed of in the same manner, dumped like trash among debris, trash, and dirt. No identification for any of these women were found at the crime scenes. No underwear was found at any of the 3 crime scenes. No skirt, no pants, no bottom half to their clothing. All 3 of them are discovered in the same general area of Los Angeles, within basically a 5-mile radius of one another. And all 3 of them just happen to have the defendant's DNA profile on them. What are the chances of that? I mean, that is a very good closing statement.
Yes, it is.
The prosecutor noted the similar locations where the bodies had been found, the way the bodies had been posed with their genitals exposed, the similar fractured neck bones and severe blunt force trauma to the victims' heads, the cocaine found in their blood, and the unsurprising fact that because of his problem maintaining an erection, the only semen-derived DNA from Little was found in semen stains on one victim's clothing. He was excluded as a source of sperm in the rape kits related to both Alfred and Apodaca due to this reason. The prosecutor then argued 3 of them, 3 murdered victims, all extremely similar. That's just an awful lot of coincidences to have to explain away to a reasonable person given the way these victims died and the similarities between their crime scenes. So to go over, we already talked about this previously, last episode, but just to go over so that people know if they're just catching in on episode 3, Alfred's body was found in an alleyway, Nelson's body was found in a dumpster, and Apodaca was found in a debris pile next to an abandoned building. The prosecutor had argued earlier Ask yourself how come when Detective Roberts was testifying yesterday, he didn't get anything out of the sexual assault samples? How come she was forced to look at things like the clothing and fingernail kits? That's because Little can't maintain an erection. You're not going to get DNA semen from the areas you'd expect from someone who could not complete the act of rape because he can't maintain an erection. You don't have DNA in the vaginal cavities. You don't have DNA in the rectal swabs as well. Then they went through and they quoted the doctrine of chances. If you want to read into that, you can read into that. Basically, the doctrine of chances teaches that the more often one does something, the more likely that something was intended and even premeditated rather than accidentally or spontaneously happened. There is no doubt that there were many similarities among the three murders. In addition, Little told police he was a professional boxer, which would explain the severe head trauma each victim suffered. He exhibited consciousness of guilt by denying that he had ever seen either Nelson or Apodaca. However, we need not to decide if this evidence alone would have been sufficient to prove Little's identity as the perpetrator, because the prosecutor also relied on other evidence that Little committed the three murders. Namely, evidence of the assaults of Hilda N., Lila M., Lori B., and Tanya J., which was admissible under Evidence Code Section 1101 to show identity, a common plan, intent, and motive. As the prosecutor told the jury, in addition to the DNA evidence in this case, you also have a pattern of prior crimes. You learn that the defendant previously committed several violent, sexually motivated crimes against women. These crimes, what they do for you is that they provide you with a blueprint. They provide you with a template to follow. Because when you look at the prior crimes, they tell you exactly what happened to the victims in the current case. Contrary to Little's argument, there were numerous similarities between the charged murders and the uncharged assaults. 3 of the assault victims testified Little was trying to kill them, and Little's own comments to police arguably indicated his intent to kill Tanya. All of the assault victims had been choked, and 3 of them had been punched in the head. 2 of the assault victims, Hilda and Nelson, had been subjected to a obviously pre-planned torture game, apparently. It was intended...
Right.
It was basically intended to arouse Little sexually. I mean, he had issues, but we know in episode 1 he found that a woman's neck is what... choking someone is what got him off.
Yeah. But it started with the teacher, isn't that right?
It started with the teacher in kindergarten when he saw her touch her neck. And then he started collecting true crime magazines. Lori's testimony about Little's inability to maintain an erection is partially significant given the DNA results from the bodies of the murder victims. All this evidence, the prosecutor argued, pointed to a very distinctive criminal pattern in which Little achieved sexual satisfaction through torturing his victims by manually strangling them, off and on, precisely in order to watch them fight desperately to draw their last breath. It's all about power and control. That's what it was all about. This game, as you heard from Lori B., let's just be clear, this defendant, he doesn't want consensual sex. That's not how he gets off. I'm going to talk plainly to you. He wants to be able to overpower his victims. He wants to play God. And the defendant says to Lori B., as he has his hands around her throat and he's pressing down on her neck, I love to feel you swallow. Swallow from me. That's how he gets sexual gratification from watching these women struggle to breathe, lose consciousness, and eventually die. Having reviewed the whole record in the light most favorable to the judgment, we conclude that it discloses substantial evidence such that a reasonable trier of fact could find the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Indeed, we conclude there was overwhelming evidence of Little's guilt.
Yeah, I would say the evidence is there.
Yeah, me too.
How long after he was found guilty before he started giving his accounts of the other murders?
It's like 2018. So, 15.
When was he convicted?
84? No, yeah, 84, I think, right? No, he was convicted in 89. So 20 years almost.
But you said he made a deal with them to not get the death penalty if he would give more information.
They wound up. So what happened was they wound up finding more evidence on other cases that led back to him. Other cold cases.
That's when the deal was made.
That's when the deal was made. It might have been 2000.
Okay.
I think it was 2012, actually.
Okay.
I think it was 2012. Let's see. I can tell you exactly. Hold on. Yep, 2012. Whenever Mincy Roberts was assigned to the cold case unit, that's whenever he started opening up and confessing certain little things. And then after Texas Rangers got involved in 2014 or 16, that's whenever he started spilling all the beans about everything. And he later died in 2020, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood.
Okay.
I could be getting the whole timeline confused, but if you go back to episode 1, listen to the timeline, it'll explain.
You're letting this Sam Little story rub off on you. Can't keep the timeline quite right.
Can't keep it just right, dude.
And he was tried in California.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Tried in Los Angeles. But Brent, that concludes my Samuel Little
journey.
I guess you would call it journey. Yeah, it's like I'm reading into it so much that it's like I don't even know how to explain it.
Now you can take a break from Sam Little for a little while.
I'm going to take a break from Sam Little for a long while.
Yeah.
A long while.
That is a very, very interesting case.
I liked it. Not in the terms of how some people might take me saying that. I liked it in the terms of he is not he's not a John Wayne Gacy. He's not an Edmund Kemper. He's not Dahmer. He's not Herdway. He's a nobody. But he is somebody.
And the thing is he has so many people he's killed, and most of the time when you have all these, when they talk to him, they will have comments made of I'm not like X.
Correct.
I'm not, or I was trying to live up to X. Yep. And that's not the case for him.
No, he was his own person.
He is who he is. He did this not for his, I want notoriety. I want to go down with this name. I want to, none of that. It was just all of in my head pleasure.
It's a fantasy that he made come true.
Yep.
Twisted.
Very, very twisted. But the other very interesting thing about him is the way he got his victims also. I mean, it wasn't like from the majority of them we heard, there was, I think I only heard one home invasion. There might have been more or whatnot, but
he didn't invade anybody's home. She claimed it was a home invasion because she didn't want to testify against him because she was a prostitute. They weren't going to take her word.
That's right. So, I mean, in every one of the victims that we heard about, none of it was, I don't want to say forcefully taken, but none of them were forcefully taken. They all willingly went with him somewhere.
Minus Tanya, who was pretty much, he approached her from behind and choked her out, pretty much put her in a headlock and drug her back. That's the only one that I know of that was forcefully taken without any prior.
She was the one that was drowned. Is that correct?
No. Tanya was the one that we just went over in the testimonies.
The last one. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Man, you have taken us on a journey.
It's been an adventure, brother.
It has. I enjoyed your research. That was a very good, very, very good.
Yeah.
3 episode Sam Little story that you told.
I'm honestly surprised it took all 3 episodes. So we wanted to break these up into roughly 45 to an hour long episodes versus dragging it on further just to try to see how that would play with the viewer counts, if it would hold y'all's attention a little better if we started kind of dropping the time down a little lower. And there's going to be some where we don't want to do this, where we're just going to go ahead and tell the whole story up front. Bada bing, bada boom. But in this one in particular, I thought that it definitely needed to be split into three different episodes just because of how everything laid out.
It worked.
So Brent, I know we talked about last episode what you were going to do, and then you kind of left me on the edge of my seat who you're going to be speaking on. Can we get some kind of insight on that?
So the case that I will be going over for the next one is not a serial killer. It was a single murder.
Oh boy.
But the but the entire story is an insane story that comes out of New Orleans, Louisiana.
Really?
And I'll tell you his name next time. Everybody, thank you for being here. Thumbs up, comments, we love them. If you want to send us an email, you can send one
at StrangeEmbersPodcast at gmail.com.
Come find us on Patreon
at patreon.com. That's patreon.com. Go to the search bar and type in Strange Embers Podcast. I do believe, Brent, that's all one word, correct?
I think it'll come up either way.
Okay. You might,
but you'll see the logo.
You'll see the logo. You might have to go to page 2 or 3. But once we start getting more Patreon memberships and people coming in there subscribing, just do the free subscription if you want to. I know Brent said that we have a $3 tier, which we're going to be working on here very soon, uploading certain images, and like this particular video is going to be on, it was on Patreon, released rather quickly after episode 2 so that you could get a quick preview if you didn't want to wait the whole 2 weeks for it. But besides that, is there anything else you want to add to this, Brent?
Thank you for being here,
and
we will see you on the next episode.
That's going to be 50 States Haunt.
It will be.
And that's going to be in South Dakota.
If you're on Patreon, we will see you for 50 States Haunt, Indiana. If you're on YouTube, you're getting this later than them, and it'll be South Dakota.
There you go.
Everybody, have a good night. Thank you for being here, and we will see you on the next episode.